House to order and ask everyone to join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for joining us again. This is the second of 2 budget workshops for the Board of Education. As I said on Tuesday, for anyone who's joining us online, we have 2 opportunities for public comment on our agenda tonight. The first will be right at the top, and the second will be towards the end. And anyone who wishes to offer comment can just enter in the comment box that you'd like to address the board. And we'll ask that you please keep comments to under 3 minutes, and that you share your name and your address with the board. I think we'll just jump right in.
Any public comments?
Are there any public comments? All right. Oh, April, excellent. Come on up. You can join us at the podium.
Good evening. April Graves, 7 Freestone Avenue. So after the budget workshop the other night, I just have a few comments and concerns about the proposed budget cuts to direct student staff in order to fund administrative staff. So the budget being proposed calls for cutting 4 paraprofessionals and a full-time math teacher. Then the addition of an administrative assistant for the athletic director and technology department. I'm sure there's a lot of work in athletics and technology. However, as being discussed many, many times, our students are still recovering from the effects of the pandemic, excuse me, both academically as well as social emotionally. This was also shown recently in the data report Eric Martin shared at a Board of Ed meeting, showing students are dropping academically on standardized test scores across the board. After seeing the data, it certainly does not seem to back up the decision to cut student staffing in favor of administrative staffing. The athletic director assistant principal position was just added last year, and we're already adding more of the budget to it. You are also not filling the addition of an assistant volleyball and coach and golf coach positions. This again is reducing what we can offer to our students in favor of administrative staff. As was stated on Tuesday, not filling these assistant coach positions means fewer students will be able to participate. Again, I feel we need to be putting our resources towards our students, not more administrative positions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, April. Is there anybody else online who wishes to address the board? Thank you. Charles, you have the floor.
All right, I'm going to go back to the podium. Sorry. All right, hello everyone. Dylan, could you pull the PowerPoint back up? So one housekeeping thing that we have to be aware of as we go through tonight. If any of the administrators are going to speak, we're going to have them come up here, because what we found is that when they were talking from back there, anybody at home couldn't hear the responses. So, and unfortunately we don't have a cordless mic. So if you guys are going to be answering questions, just, you know, lace up your shoes and come on up, and we'll use the microphone here. All right, so I provided you all another copy of the presentation I used. The first, tranche of slides are the same, but I did receive some questions from Tuesday to today, and I updated the slides with answers to those questions, and I figured that would be a good place for us to start. Answer the questions that I received from board members by email over the past 48 hours, and then of course any additional questions. So if you jump forward to, I think it's page number, page 11, and it starts with these follow-up questions. So since our meeting Tuesday, several questions came in. Some of them were asked at the meeting Tuesday night, but Stephanie and I debriefed Wednesday morning. We're like, oh, we didn't quite get that question exactly right. So we're gonna make sure that we give you all of the information and then have an additional handout for you tonight. So why don't we jump to the first question. So the first question I got, and it was asked by Dave right at the end of the meeting, right? And Stephanie and I answered it. I think our brains were a little tired. It's been a 2.5-hour night. So we want to make sure that everybody is aware of which of the, and I'm not going to call them grants because I think that might confuse it. I've decided to call them now revenue sources, are included in that $28 million request, and which are not, because we do have the amount of money that we spend in Portland is actually quite a bit above 28 million, because some of the revenue sources are not included in that number, but are sort of a second, bucket of money that we use. So, in general, when Dave asked the question, Stephanie answered it correctly, but I wanted to clarify it. The two revenue sources that are in that number are the ECS grant. That's the big one that we received from the state, and that's the one that we don't know yet. As a matter of fact, tomorrow I'm going to a legislative breakfast, and of course, we'll be meeting with our state reps and advocating for fully funding the ECS grant and increasing it. And the Oak Hill revenue that we receive from the rental at Brownstone. Those two sources of revenue are included in there. These other sources are not included in that number. Now, Stephanie put together, and Tricia handed it out to you, a handout. Dave asked for a listing of what positions these revenue sources fund. Now, I want to be clear. These positions on here were included in those staffing profiles that I showed you at each of the schools, right? So, anybody, if you had a calculator and you added up all of those positions, multiplied it by the hourly rates or salaries they were paid, you'd quickly see that it surpasses the $23 million number. But these numbers here that Stephanie provided for you in this handout identifies what positions are funded by those grants that are not the ECS and the Oak Hill grant. That was the nexus of Dave's question, and I wanted to make sure that we answered it more comprehensively so that you're seeing. So these are the grants, these are the positions they fund, and then at the very end of that, where you see it, I think Stephanie totaled it at the end, didn't you, Stephanie?
She did.
Yeah.
There's a third page.
Well, right, the third page. So right at the end there, you'll notice that those revenue sources total 1,805,000, 345. So really, the total amount that we spend is that number plus 23 million. So it's at 25 million, right? But some of the sources we use are from the grants. So we can go through them one at a time, or you can just take a look at them. For example, we have our Title I, Title II, Open Choice Support, Open Choice Academic. Obviously the ESSER funds, which we've talked about, the SIG grant that we wrote, IDEA, and then the reimbursement we receive for our Open Choice students.
I never really understood why we do it this way, because most people budget all your expenses, and then you have your revenues, and they offset. You don't build them into your budget, because if all of a sudden these grants get reduced or go away, we're screwed.
Correct, yeah, I mean, that's true. Certainly, one of the ones that is most uncertain would be the Open Choice Grant. And part of the reason for that is we don't know, we can't, we can guess. We can make an educated guess based on what our Open Choice enrollment will be. Stephanie's put the number 70 in there. It could be higher, it could be lower, right? And that's part of the challenges that we have in managing this is, and even now, even the ones we do know, ECS, we don't know that number yet. But there are lots of things in the budget that unfortunately we don't know yet, like the insurance premiums, right? I mean, we're building a budget for essentially 18 months from now, right? So, but, we have a pretty good sense. We're comfortable with these numbers that we've presented to you tonight. But of course, they're subject to change. And if you remember, even last year, we changed the budget several times once we got the insurance premium or made adjustments throughout the process.
I think the public thinks it takes 23 million to run our schools, when it actually takes 28 million to run our schools. So they're really not getting that transparency on what it actually costs to run our schools.
Well, I think we're doing that now. So it was a great question. I'm glad we could clarify that. But these other revenue sources that say is not included, though they total up to what you have here, which is the 1.8 million, and you see where we've identified how to pay for those. And we've been that's sort of the way it's been done for years now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It has. I agree with Dave. I know what you're saying, David. I agree, because it costs far more than it appears.
Kind of smoke and mirrors. a little
Well,
bit.
it's not, I wouldn't say that, but yeah, it's like off-budget numbers versus on-budget.
It just doesn't, we're not sharing the full picture.
Right, yeah.
And I
Well,
understand
we've
why
never
we want to
shared
do that.
the
And I
full-
think, I mean, Charles and I spoke about that idea this morning, that maybe there's a way for us to look at this for next budget cycle, for a year from now, to look at our format and see if there's a way to make sure that
Mhm.
everything is fully represented, so that the budget that we give to the Board of Selectmen and to our community paints a complete picture of the costs.
Yeah, I agree.
But
But
that's
our-
sort of for next year.
But our cost per pupil is based on what? It's based on,
It's based on everything.
On
So
the whole
if you look
thing.
at our auditor's report, if you look at all the state reports.
Right.
All the
it
revenue that
includes-
comes in
right.
from
it inclu-
whatever's,
So our cost per expenditure per pupil, if you look at that document, you'll see that the amount spent was like 24 million.
right,
Our budget was only 22 million, because that takes into account, these are
Right.
considered special revenue
Right.
accounts. So that's why they're not
so
intermingled with.
we're not, it's not that we're hiding or we're not being transparent, it's that there are some things that are variables that we can't know what the excess cost share is gonna be, so, that is figured into the total per pupil cost, so when somebody looks up online and says Portland spends $18,000 per student, that includes all of the above. So it's not, we are transparent, we are sharing that.
Yeah.
But again, this budget is a picture of right now on January 11th. We don't know what June the 14th is gonna look like.
Right, and I'll give you an example. The SIG grant, right? I think we've been very transparent about that.
We have.
You know, Ryan's presented it, Eric's presented it, we know we've had it for the past 2
Right.
years. We anticipate that we'll have it for 2 more years. We're very clear about, the interventionists and the special ed teacher that we're funding with that. As a matter of fact, Ryan has scheduled a time for Craig, who was our grant manager with the state. We're gonna meet, we're gonna continue to be transparent. Let me give you another example. Right now, we have a grant out there that I'm waited with bated breath to find out. It's the mental health grant. I reported to you that I'm applying for it, that I've asked to use that to fund a clinician at the middle school.
Right.
But that would be, we would add that here, right?
Right.
And then we would, be paying for that clinician for the length of time that the
Grant.
revenue source
Yeah.
is available to us.
Right.
But it wouldn't be necessarily in that 23 million, but we would be there. Now, what does that mean? That means that if the SIG grant, or if we got the mental health grant, when they sunset, those positions are eliminated,
Right.
or we then roll them into the LEA budget through the normal process of budget development.
Have to, yeah.
Right. So, I think we're pretty honest and open about
Yeah, I think
all of the sources we're coming in. But Dave, to your point, I think it is fair, we can start to have the slides, not just identifying the funding sources, but we can do this each year. We can say, these revenue sources are included in that number, these are not, and that's subject to change. I'll give you one other example. Bob and I recently attended a webinar, and I put in a concept paper, which if I did a good job on that, we'd be invited to apply for a federal energy grant. That if we got that, we'd have the ability to upgrade the LEA lighting and control systems at the secondary school, and that would generate enormous savings from our energy bill. Now, you don't see that here, but hey, if I get really good news and come back to you in May, excited to share that, that
That's
would be
additional funding
an additional
revenue.
funding source.
Yeah. Yeah,
Keep your fingers crossed, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
are we open for questions now? Just on the ESSR,
Mhm.
on your, or are we gonna come to this
We're gonna come to
spreadsheet
that
later?
one specifically.
Okay.
I have a question about ESSER for another slide, so if there are ones about any of these other ones, we can ask those, because I didn't get questions about any of the other grants except ESSER, which I have as a separate slide. Okay, good. All right, why don't we advance the slide and get to the second question then? So the second question came in about what the capacity is, how many students we are currently servicing in our specialized programming, what is the capacity of those programs, and then how many students do we have outplaced. So I appreciate Dawn's work. Dawn pulled this together for us, and here she's broken down for you by school, the number of students we're serving in our ABA program at Valley View, number of students who are outplaced from Valley View, and the number of students who are in the bridge program from Valley View, which in this case is there aren't any, but you can see those here. And then she did the same thing with our RISE program and our number of Gildersleeve students who are in the bridge program, and then the number of students we have outplaced at Gildersleeve. We sort of did this by school so you could get a look, and you can anticipate that in a moment you're going to see Brownstone in the middle school and then the high school. So Dawn's here. Certainly she can come up and answer any questions, but this is really good information for you to have. I thought it was an excellent question. By the way, when you hear me say that these programs generate enormous savings, you know, the majority, if not all, of these students who we weren't servicing in-house, if we didn't have these programs, would be in outplacements, which, as you can see from the numbers, are significantly more expensive because they include both the tuition to those outplacements and transportation, and they're our students. We want to keep them in town. We want them to be educated in the town where they reside. Some students' needs surpass our ability to service them in the LEA, and in those cases, I would say that our placements, we align with our very high quality and meet those students' needs. But, you know, kudos to Dawn for all of the hard work she's done building these programs, which both is a cost savings measure and helps us ensure that we have the supports for our students in-house. Dawn is here. Yeah, you need to come up to the microphone here just so everybody watching this can hear. So this is how we have it set up. Anticipate the next slide's going to be Brownstone and the middle school, and the one after that will be high school, but here's Dawn. She would be happy to.
So one of the questions that was asked is what is the capacity of each program? But the capacity is not a hard set number. It's dependent upon the needs of the kids in the program. So not to sound wishy-washy about it, but we could have 6 kids in the program that are exuding the needs of or exceeding the needs of the resources that we have in the program. Or we could have 12 kids that maybe only have half the level of need. But all of these programs, the only one that's really at capacity right now, or will be at capacity, you'll see it in a moment, is the high school, middle school, high school, Life Skills Program 1, but that's what we're talking about for next year with building out the transition program. And then 2 is the bridge program, because we have a number of kids in the bridge, or not bridge, I'm sorry, harbor. We have a number of kids in the harbor program, but we also right now are working with the 2 administrators from the middle school and high school because we have several kids that we think are going to need to move into there. When we started the harbor program, historically, that's when we had the combination program with Wheeler Clinic. Their capacity, their hard stop was 12. But we also know, Kate and I have spoken many times, that it might be 14 or 15 because some of those kids aren't in there all the time. They only need part day, or they only need maybe the more clinical support than they do, you know, the self-contained classroom parts. Or it could be an even smaller number if the students' needs are really intensive. So to answer that part of the question as far as capacity, it's hard to say what the capacity is because it's not like a set number of desks or anything like that. I will tell you every single program right now is running pretty full and pretty effectively. I don't think any of the programs are overstressed, and we don't have anybody that we're looking to outplace right at this moment because we can't program for them in school. So that analysis was one of the questions that I know you guys asked was, do we have kids that we don't have in district because we don't have a place for them? The kids that are outplaced right now have a significant need, for their programming, whether it's a hospital-based program or even some of our kids are in what we call a residential program, or just they also need to be off campus in a very small setting. Is there any other questions about that?
Could you just kind of talk a little bit about the para support at Gildersleeve? Losing 2 paras at Gildersleeve, how are the paras within the Bridge and Rise program and serving students that aren't in that program, and how will those 2 paras impact how everything functions?
Well, remember, all of our paras they're hired district-wide. So if we talk about losing a para at Gildersleeve, it's really, we can move paras from other programs where there's maybe less of a need. I'll give you an example. Jessica called me up this afternoon and said, we have a brand new student coming into school, just registered, and we need to talk. And it's a student with some significant needs. So if we had, say, for example, a spare para, not a spare para, but we had less of a need at the high school, we could move one of those high school paras over to Valley View to support Jessica's new need. So when we look at paras, we always look system-wide. So while we're talking about reducing 2 paras, it's a very slippery slope to begin with, because we are worried about, do those needs come back? Based upon when we built the budget and we made the cuts, we figured we could do that. We could not fill those 2 positions that are retirements, but that doesn't mean that we may not need those, you know, if needs arise. If I get more phone calls like I received from Jessica today, then, you know, that might be a different situation that we're having as we get closer to July 1st. Does that help, Ken?
Thank you.
So why don't we advance the slide and take a look at Brownstone and the middle school.
And I'll point out that these numbers ebb and flow. I can remember when I had several students outplaced from Brownstone, and you know, now we have a couple. I can remember when we had several students outplaced from the middle school, and now we have nobody outplaced from the middle school. Some of it just means that some of the kids that are outplaced and are needing to remain outplaced are moving up in grades, and they've moved up to the high school. Sometimes it means that we've brought them back, but those numbers ebb and flow every year, really every month.
Almost every week.
Yeah, it does change.
And then we'll advance the slide and take a look at high school.
And I did note about the life skills in the high school, the number of students that we have, but that 4 students are going to graduate and move into their post-grad years to join the other 2 in their post-grad years. So that's going to be a total of 6 requiring transition program. So that translates to what we were requesting about moving that special ed teacher, moving a special ed position to staff a transition program and develop it in the way that the state requires 18 to 22-year-old programming to be.
So does that leave for next year 2 students in the traditional life skills program?
No, it leaves, it leaves 2 at the high school level, but I think there's, I forget off the top of my head, I think there's 6 at the middle school level. So it's that 712, it's that 712 band.
Okay.
So. And remember too, we still have several students at the Brownstone level that are in that life skills type of need. They need that functional curriculum, and we don't have a standalone program for that at Brownstone. So right now they're being serviced by one of our regular grade level special ed teachers and building programming, you know, to the best of their ability. But that's that one spot where our programming breaks down from K through 12 as far as functional life skills type of curriculum. The ABA program, and then RISE, and then the life skills program 712. So it's able to be done, but once again, it takes away from other case management responsibilities.
Can I ask a quick question about that? Because it's hard with 3 elementary schools and the way that they're broken up to be able to provide the functional life skills programs at 3 separate elementary schools. That's a lot. But I wonder, would it be feasible? Have you considered what it would take to meet the needs of those students at BIS at the RISE program at Gildersleeve in the same way that we bring students from Valley View and Gildersleeve to the Bridge program at BIS? Is there possibility for that?
We're looking at that. One of the things that worries me the most about that, there's always ability to move things around.
Mm-hmm.
Our transportation costs of moving kids back and forth to their home school to make sure they have time with their typical peers is one piece.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other piece is also space. Because when we look at, you know, the RISE program, Ryan will probably tell you at Gildersleeve is busting at the seams. And you know, we do have a classroom at Brownstone, but you know, we've spoken about that. We've also looked at, you know, in the past, we've historically had some older kids, like Brownstone age kids, that needed life skills programming that went to the high school, to the 712 program, and we bust them up there. So we have to look at what's developmentally appropriate.
Right.
But since we did cut that position, that is something that we have to look at creatively for next year.
But I'm glad you asked that question, because it's something to think about. Again, a lot of what we're doing now is preparing ourselves for a conversation this spring about the future. And might some consolidation within our schools provide some opportunities to consolidate some of these services? Because the other piece that Dawn didn't mention is that we want our students access to non-disabled peers at their age level.
Sure.
Right. So to have a sixth grader in the RISE program at Gildersleeve, there's some questions about that. What do we want? Are the peers that student, the non-disabled peers that student would access, would be second, third, fourth graders, not fifth and sixth grade? And there's a developmental difference, of course.
And the other concern about that, just for the immediate future, and I know this is a superficial concern, but if I were a parent of a fifth or sixth grade, next year's fifth or sixth grade life skills type student, for them to now regress and be put back at Gildersleeve, I think would be culturally a hard thing to do.
Sure.
Now, as we move forward and we develop whatever is going to be the new model for the buildings based upon the facility study, that may, that will become part of the culture. It won't be like a demotion or
Right.
a
Right.
regression. Any other questions for me? You know where to find me.
Thank you, Dawn. This is really
You're welcome.
appreciated.
All right, let's advance the slide. So our third question was about the administrative assistant. This is the only new position that we're asking for, and this again is a 10-month administrative assistant that I'm seeing a shared responsibility with our assistant principal to help primarily with athletics, but also the assistant principal responsibilities in the building, and our director of curriculum instruction and technology. And I just want to impress on everybody a couple of things. Our assistant principal, he shoulders an awful lot, right? We changed that position and we created that position knowing that it would be a heavy lift. I can tell you from personal experience, that was my first job. It's being an assistant principal, showing up at 7 o'clock every morning and managing the building. And then, when I was doing it, I also think of my second shift job when all the athletics happens. It's an awful lot of managerial responsibilities that I know that the assistant principal would be more effective in that position if we could take some of the administrative burden off of him in terms of rescheduling the transportation and the referees when it rains and helping with the scheduling and checking students' ID for all of the paperwork and background that we have to do in order to make sure that they're in compliance and able to participate, as well as helping him with managing his responsibilities as an administrator in the building during the day. I know that would make him far more effective in the position and create the type of work environment where I know that he would benefit. Additionally, in terms of Eric's position, I have to remind everybody, when I was there, I had 4 people, right? I had 4 folks working with me, and we were already stretched thin. 3 years ago now, one of those positions was eliminated, right? So we're trying to get back to that place in supporting Eric and his responsibilities, particularly with technology, with some administrative support. That's still a reduction from where we were 3 years ago. This is particularly important in my opinion now, because we're undergoing a huge, very heavy lift, major transition in our student information systems. And that first year of implementation, that transition now, I can tell you, is an awful lot of work that's going on. But there's going to definitely be some learning and some data management work that has to happen next year. The person that we have in that position is largely doing a lot of the administrative work for the Department of Technology now. So to help out with that would create a more seamless transition into this new student information system. I understand, I hear the concerns about whether this is a direct support in the classroom, but in a roundabout way, I promise you it is. This is something that is directly supporting our students by creating the space for our administrators to work more effectively directly in the classroom. So that's my plea. It's my hope you'll support it. I'd be happy to answer any questions about it. And I know Kate's here and Eric are here too to give you their insights.
I have a question on that. I mean, all of those things need to be happening now. And I don't know if the assistant principal is doing them himself or Is there an arrangement now where those are kind of parceled out amongst the existing administrative assistants or secretaries? Or if they're not, why wouldn't that occur? Wouldn't that be a natural managerial task to say, well, we have this overage of need of things to be done that are primarily clerical, yet we don't have a person to do that? In the absence of a person, we would spread that amongst people who are available to do that. Is that?
Keith, do you wanna tackle that one?
Thank you, Dr. Britton. To your point, to answer your question directly, the assistant principal and / athletic director, responsibility for athletics, is performing clerical tasks that are significantly usurping his time with kids. And I don't ever want to take paraprofessionals away from kindergartners who need them, for sure. But when we created this position last year, we did so, and we essentially doubled it. We went from a purely athletic director position to an assistant principal in 2 buildings with responsibilities for athletics. The assistant principal is one of the most student-driven administrative positions in the building. And I would much rather have in the school, and I'm sure the board would agree, leveraging our highly qualified, highly paid administrators working directly with kids rather than completing day-to-day administrative tasks. The high school's slightly a different entity when it comes to need for administrative support. We have the 10-month secretary in the front office who is really responsible for everything student and parent facing. That's your attendance, that's your early dismissals, that's your working papers for kids, and all of the phone ringing off the hook all day. We have your 12-month secretary, who is my assistant, who is responsible primarily for all the things that come out of my office, as well as primarily the budget and management of the building, such as the secondary school calendars and building use and all of those pieces. And then we have a guidance secretary, who is another full-time position managing college applications, tuition, transcript requests, and the work of the counseling department. The people that hold those positions have truly extended themselves to help the new administrative position. And that's their, beyond the scope of their job descriptions and job responsibilities historically. I can't say enough about what team players they want to be. But the fact remains that we are using administrative time to complete administrative assistant work to ensure the smooth running of the programs, the time-sensitive programs such as athletics. We hired probably one of the most gifted administrators I've ever worked with to fill this position. I would much rather have him sitting with kids, working with kids, helping them process their feelings, their emotions. They dysregulated in their own way during COVID. And when I look at the use of his skill set and the use of the position, I really think it's responsible and prudent to have that person working directly with kids, working directly with teachers. And that is and has been an identified need at the high school.
Eric, do you want to say a few things in terms of how
Can I follow up with a question? Just so it's been looked at to assign, like the phone calls about transportation. I mean, I'm just talking about athletics in particular. And some of those things that come up that, the bumps in the road that need to be smoothed out, someone's got to make a phone call, someone's got to connect with somebody. You've looked at using the existing administrative assistants, secretarial staff for that, and they can't do it because it's not in their job description, or is it because they truly don't have the space in their broad, their wavelength to be able to
It's both.
take on another task?
It's both.
Yep.
All 3 of the secretarial positions are working to full capacity. Is there always room to squeeze one more thing in? That's what we do as educators, and that's what I've always been blessed to have people that work the culture of the high school as we pitch in and help each other. But there are some very special articulated needs that go into running an athletics department, and many of them are related to CIAC and reporting stats and game scores and weights of wrestlers and all of these other things that work through an additional software system known as Arbiter. There's the transportation, which is like running a small company. And then there is the scheduling of games, the moving of games, when the team we're supposed to play gets COVID, when are we gonna move it to? Filling out the paperwork for paying the refs, paying the ticket workers, that's what our athletic director is currently doing with a lot of his time. And I just don't feel that's appropriate for what his gifts are and what his talents are.
Our assistant principal, you mean, right?
Our assistant principal with, well, and it's interesting, think about why I said that, because of the amount of time this position is spending doing athletics versus assistant principal work that they could be doing with adequate support.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Eric, the other half is for you, maybe if you want to talk a little bit about your needs and the needs of the technology department and curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, let me start. Does anyone have any questions for me, particularly about the need for administrative assistance in the technology department? I mean, I can speak to the needs, but I just want to make sure, are there any specific questions about it? So, prior to COVID, we were not a one-to-one school district. In the time since COVID, we have become a one-to-one school district, which means the technology department now manages over 1,500 laptop devices, in addition to all of our fixed hardware, our desktops, our projectors. Those devices are continually in need of repair. We have a help desk system that generates emails that need to be sorted, tickets that need to be assigned, and we are at our lowest staffing levels in terms of personnel who are able to repair the highest number of devices we've ever had in the district. So the demands on those fewer individuals for repairs are higher than they've ever been. In addition, they're having to spend time doing the pre-repair work of sorting help desk emails and assigning them, which again is clerical work just to get to the place of repair. The consequence of that is long delays in the time with which we can get critical instructional technologies repaired and back into the hands of the user, all of which create teaching and learning disruptions. So I stood up here and talked about student achievement. The more disruptions we have to processes of teaching and learning, the more disruptions we're going to have towards our goals of improving student achievement. So getting an administrative assistant to support our very talented IT staff will help us to expedite repairs and to minimize disruptions that ultimately affect students' abilities to learn and achieve. In terms of our district data specialist, who, as we've transitioned to Power School, that has become a new title for her because of the weight of that lift and the weight that we're going to carry as we transition into Power School over the next 3 years. Perhaps longer, but Power School has told us pretty bluntly that it takes about 3 years until you've really got your feet under you. And we are very blessed, I will name her, and to have in Holly Russo someone that is taking that work and doing it. But to the question of bandwidth, Tim, like it's pushing her to the brink of her bandwidth. I depend on Holly as a de facto administrative assistant. So she does things for me like processes purchase order requests that come into my office, processes professional learning requests that come into my office. So things that I critically depend on her for that are clerical tasks in nature. You know, I need someone to continue to do that work. And I worry for Holly, given the stress that she's under with Power School, of keeping that on her plate. And she's told us, you know, right now she's at her near breaking point. She's not breaking because she's an incredibly strong person. But I don't want to push her to that point. I don't want to find out, right? The other thing I'll say is, as the Director of Curriculum Instruction and Technology, let's focus on instruction for a moment. My foremost job in this district is to help our teachers improve instructional practices and to help our school principals become better instructional leaders. The only way I can do that is by being out of my office. And I feel at times hopelessly tethered to my desk, performing what are tasks that I would readily hand off to an administrative assistant if I had one available to me. It's not an overwhelming amount of tasks, but they're clerical tasks in nature. And to Kate's point, it has an impact. You know, is it by proxy to students? It is by proxy to students, but if we want to make our teachers more effective in their instruction, then they need the types of direct feedback and professional learning to become better. And the only way to do that is by freeing administrators, including myself and school principals, to be in classrooms more. And that is the effect of getting this administrative assistant position in the books. And it's not just so, you know, our incredibly talented assistant principal with responsibilities for athletics can help students when they're in spots of trouble or social emotional dysregulation. He is also a critical instructional leader in the building. He's someone that we depend on to be getting into classrooms and seeing instruction and helping teachers recognize where it could be better and helping them to get there, as we're all trying to do. So, you know, this is more than a want or a wish. This is a really, really critical need for the district that will serve us at scale. And I understand that it seems like it's running in opposition to direct student support. It is by proxy, but it's the type of support that at scale is gonna help us to realize those lofty goals that we set, and that when we present them to the board, you guys say, yes, that sounds great, and we wanna get there, and how soon? How soon is directly tied to the availability of administrative assistants like this position is gonna help us to have.
Thank you.
And the cost for this full-time position?
10 month. It's
It's like 37,000-ish
With-
for a step, well, plus benefits, depending on if they take benefits. So if it's a single, 7,000, if it's a two-person, 15,000, if it's a family, like 28,000. Just, you don't know what the person's
Right.
gonna take, or they could take nothing.
So I know it was presented as a half-time for each of them. I have to say, I'm sure I'm gonna be very unpopular in here right now. I know clerical duties, I'm kind of chuckling inside thinking about the pile on my desk that will keep me from students when I'm at school as well. I think we can all speak to that. Teachers have clerical, you know, inputting all the test scores into the systems and all of that, and we would all love to have assistance. And don't get me wrong, I understand that the needs have changed, and I hear everything that you're saying. I have a really hard time adding this position to the budget, knowing we're losing paras, and that down the line, if, when we get to this cliff that we've been talking about with all of the funding sources, what's going to be cut at that point? I'm sure this position won't be on the chopping block, but what will be? Direct student services again. So my concern is putting this in now, where does it leave us? It's written as 0.5s, but then to your point again, we're making it a 1, so then we're talking about benefits. I think I would feel better about it if it was a 0.5 total, and we didn't have to worry about the benefits, and I think that would kind of alleviate and, you know, give you both departments the support they need in a reasonable way, and maybe do, like Tim said, a little bit more, you know, divvying it out. You're talking about 4 between the middle school and the high school, 4 assistants that could possibly pick up some of the slack. To me, that seems more manageable, and I would feel better and supportive about that.
But maybe we'll keep going, and then we can loop back to all these, because, you know, at some point, if it's a desire to reduce the budget by a certain amount, Stephanie can help us figure out what that is, whether it's the position or make it part-time, or otherwise, I have some other ideas. I always have a plan B, so I've got one, right? I like plan Bs. Actually, I have plan C, D, and E through Z too, but let's go to the next slide and work our way through some of these questions. All right, so I know this is a big concern, right? And let me back up by saying that Jessica and I and Dawn have had a lot of conversations about this, right? This is one of those ones in the budget that we don't know for sure, right? But we can only look at past experience and learn from past experience to be able to anticipate the future, because we don't even know how many gardeners we're gonna have next year, right? I mean, we could have a year where we have 125, or we could have 75, right? It's different, right? But in general, each year, Jessica and Dawn took a look. At some point throughout the year, as students are identified, somewhere between 2 to 4 paraprofessionals have been added. Now, that's either shown up as a new request, which you're all familiar with. It begins with sharing the request with the personnel committee, bringing it to the board, and getting authorization for it. Or, as students are identified at certain points throughout the year, we're able to reallocate existing paras because, for example, a student may have been outplaced, right, which creates that space, or a student might have moved out of district. You know, it's the number of paraprofessionals you need is always moving and always sensitive to the needs that you have, because as a reminder, we only have one paraprofessional in the entire district that's not here as a function of IEP-driven needs, right? Now, Jessica can talk to you a little bit more about this in terms of what happens at Valley View, and the challenge here is that it takes approximately 3 to 6 months to move an incoming student through what we call the SRBI process, place the student either diagnostically or engage in the PPT process that leads to the identification. So Jess, why don't you come up and talk a little bit about why we can't just, well, how long it takes and otherwise what you've seen in years past.
I actually think what is very important right now is to talk some numbers, because I stand here right now, we're talking about 4 more requests since the start of the year. And if you go back last year and the year before, it is the same story. I have the data to prove it.
4 more requests for what?
Paras.
Oh, for paras.
For support for student needs.
In kindergarten.
Yes, in kindergarten. And as Dawn said, just today, we have another student joining us that we didn't know about, that was coming our way, that does need para support.
So when you say request, you mean these are like IEP identified, right? So
driven.
they're really driven,
This is
they're
IEP.
really mandated because you're
So when we
required
talk
to
about
supply them.
classroom paras, that's not what I'm standing up here asking for. What I'm saying is, these little guys, when they're transitioning into kindergarten, they are missing their parents. They are the potty training that we have to do currently with incoming kindergarten is beyond anything I've ever seen. The most this year that I've ever seen. We are doing things that we haven't had to do in the past. The social and emotional skills, the children cannot self-regulate. So we are spending a lot of time and energy and efforts of trying to help manage behaviors in the classroom when they come in. And I'm talking about throwing chairs, and I'm talking about aggressive behaviors. The purpose of having a transition para is to support all the students in the classroom, not just the student that is upset or not able to regulate, but to keep everyone safe and to keep everyone created a welcoming environment for them in the beginning of the school year. Who wants to go in the beginning of the school year in a hostile environment? We don't want to do that. And when I say, you know, I'm struggling thinking creatively, how can I present this in a way that will be budget friendly? So when we talk about transition paras, we will have students identified. And even if we didn't have, and we have the last 3 years, 3 or more, we have incoming preschool kids that need para support that I will come back to you and ask for paras for. So that transitional para could be assigned to someone in preschool or even first grade. Sometimes we get new incoming first grade with IEPs that say they need a para. Every year, and I have the data to show you, that every year it's at least. This year we have 4 already. I don't even know who's on my doorstep to come. So to me it makes sense when we're talking about being proactive, because here we are helping all these students transition into their first year of school for many of them, but then we're also not fighting over trying to find a para. It takes so long to find someone to even apply to the jobs. We don't have applicants. So if I'm starting the school year without those people in place, then I'm not finding anyone. Last year I had to use subs. That's what I used for para support for kids that really, truly need skilled paraprofessionals. If we had people in place, they already know the culture of the building, they already know the students, they fall right into that position. We're not fighting for trying to find someone. It just makes a lot of sense. And budget-wise, you're going to be spending that money later, and you didn't budget for it, or we didn't budget for it. This is showing that we're being proactive, but we're also budgeting for something we know that is going to come up, because for the past 3 years, and I bet if I went back further, it would be the same. It's just, I have the data for the past 3 years. So if you count preschool too, hold on to your seats, everyone, because if you count preschool too, I have 4 students on that list.
So just a larger question, and I don't expect an answer, but kindergarten assessment, we're one of the few states that doesn't have a written kindergarten assessment. Everybody assesses a little differently. Every district does what they're
For
going to do.
incoming?
For incoming.
So we actually do call them in, and we have created our own.
Right.
So we have a tidbit, but you don't see the behaviors. You don't see
Is
that
it,
piece of
is it more than one day though? Because I know,
No.
you know, back in the day, it was a quick visit in the morning, and parents, they could read and write their name or whatever and draw a picture
So
and
we do it
color in the
differently.
lines.
We do one-on-one.
Okay.
So we do, and we have a
So it
scoring
is an
system,
in-depth-
and they
okay.
are at risk or on. So it
Okay.
does tell us a lot academically.
So my
We have a
larger-
parent sheet
Right.
they fill
Okay.
out
Okay.
for the behavior part.
Right.
But we only know what's written on that sheet. And you only know what you see in the brief time that you're meeting the child one-on-one, which they present differently one-on-one, we all know that. So it's really hard to tell the behavioral needs. And for some kids, they might not even know they have those needs because they've never been in a classroom full of
Right.
students.
Okay.
So
Is it
just-
possible through the assessment, though, that some of these kids aren't ready for kindergarten and should be in a preschool class?
So we
And
can't force that.
I know that. Okay, but that's.
We
the-
can encourage those ready, like, for instance, we had 7 kids that needed some potty training. So over the summer, I sent some literature home to parents about what we can do to get them ready, because, you know, back in the day, kids were always potty trained when they came to kindergarten.
That was a requirement.
That was what we did. So I can give literature and I can educate,
Right,
but the law says they can come to school if they are of age.
okay.
So it's,
So we're between a rock and a hard spot, and
We have to
we need
service
8
them.
paras, yeah, okay.
and we have to find ways to service them. And I was trying to think creatively in how can we do that? You know, and what people don't think about is just even buckling up their or zipping up their jackets or taking out their backpacks. A lot of them don't know how to do that yet. So with this transitional para, they can get them used to coming to school, getting used to the routine, getting used to doing those things and teaching them how to be a little more independent. And then they are assigned to someone as soon as someone tests in. And that could be the next day. We can get a new student the next day with an IEP that says they need a one-on-one para. And in my mind, we would take one of those paras, and there you go. We don't have to wait. The kid's getting serviced right away.
Jessica, going back to what you said earlier, you have 4 students who are currently in district who are identified as needing a one-to-one para.
One of them is not currently, one of them's new and registering.
Right, and so those 4 are not in the current
Right.
requested budget.
Right. And also the preschool students are not in the current budget as well either.
So we can presume that we're going to have increased needs for paras next year over
Yes.
what we have in the proposed budget.
So 2 of the pairs are being filled by subs right now. So they're eventually going to have to be filled for real. And then the other 2 will be coming our way shortly. So, and then our preschool kids, when they come, it's a halftime para because the program is halftime. So when you get 2, that equals 1. But it's very real. The needs that we're getting are very, I'm not standing up here asking in any instructional support.
Right.
That's not what I'm even asking for, because we're not even there. We have to get them regulated in order to be able to do the instructional piece. So, you know, I'm standing here asking for something that we need.
Jessica, the four potential paras that are going to be required in kindergarten now that you're, imagine, will be bringing requests to the personnel committee at some point in the near future around these, as well as the preschool students who are needing who are in the IEP process and will require paras. I guess part one of the question is, are those preschool students heading to kindergarten next year?
No.
Okay, so they will continue to be, I imagine, in
Yes.
preschool next year.
Yes.
So those positions will be again required next year.
Right. And when they get to preschool, it becomes a full-time versus half-time.
Right.
When they get to kindergarten.
I mean kindergarten, sorry, yes,
Yes.
when they move out of preschool.
Yes.
So they're currently coming from birth to 3.
Gotcha. Okay, I had another question. I think I've lost it, but that's all right. Yeah, thank you.
No other questions?
I do have one clarifying question that maybe somebody else, you said registration's done at Valley View. So what does that look like when you only have 10-month administrative people in your building?
It's a challenge. It is, it's a challenge, because registration is every day, and it's collecting documents and meeting with parents and inputting data into the system, and we don't have someone every day during the summer to do it. So it doesn't always, and another piece of that you guys probably aren't aware of is when they register, we have to set up busing for new students that are coming to our district. And they need it like yesterday, but we don't have it because they haven't finished registering.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a constant communication between the bus company and us with our new kindergarten students. So it is a challenge.
Do you still do the 1 week in March of open enrollment?
We
where-
actually combined it with
Okay.
so we do the orientation and the registration. So while
All
the
at the same
student is
time.
being assessed,
Okay.
we meet with the parents
Okay.
and we collect what we need from them.
Right, okay.
So
For
the-
registration.
That sounds good.
But a lot of people don't come, or they don't hand in all their documents.
Right.
They come just to meet me, talk to me. They don't necessarily bring everything they're supposed to bring, or they wait, you know, they have to get the health forms. That's all over the summer.
I'm certain I was guilty of that, I'm sorry.
Many of you know the process.
Yeah.
And also these students that are IEP'd, special transportation,
Right.
they're on
Has to
little
be
buses.
arranged as
They're on
well.
little buses, okay.
In fact, I thought we came up with a plan to allow for the registration over the summer. So is that
Yeah, let me grab that with you.
Okay.
new information? Because that's not
We
the way
have
I
a-
understand it.
Stay tuned. You know,
Yeah.
I think we'll be going deep into a rabbit hole if I start talking about registration right now. But just understand, it's going to change this year, both in terms of how, because we have a new student information system, which
Right.
is hopefully going to be making things easier, and who, based on, as you know from some of our previous board meetings, some challenges we've had with
Right.
the who is doing it. So we're working on it. I think what, likely, I'll be able to give you the game plan, March, April, May-ish, coming right up. But yes, we're working on it. We're gonna streamline it. But we will make it work. It will be done smoothly and efficiently, and hopefully with a new, software platform that is far more user-friendly than the one we're using now, which makes it very complicated. All right, so let's go to I think that we'll have one more question, if I remember correctly, and then we can open up in general. This is the one, right. So the question was raised about the ESSER funds. Now, again, as a reminder, these are the COVID relief funds that we have to spend down by July 1, 2024. They're no longer here. And this is the cliff, although I like to call it a parachute, right? We're gonna parachute into this, right? But it is a fact that by applying the $200,000 towards the budget in the way that we recommend, which you'll notice was on the handout in terms of how we propose to fill it, we are starting in terms of next year's budget in a deficit position. Now, in fairness, Stephanie and I have been doing this together now for 3 years. Stephanie, have we ever started a year not in a deficit position? Remember the COVID year? Oh my God, like, oh geez. I mean, we've started years in deficit positions far surpassing 200,000, right? I mean, this is another one, right? I mean, it would be nice to start a year. I think it will happen some point in my career here, hopefully,
Since
right?
I started 5 years ago and everybody said, it'll get easier, it'll get easier.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
Every year, we started behind the 8 ball. Every year, right? And this year's no exception. We started behind the 8 ball this year, and then we put ourselves farther behind the 8 ball with more needs, like the need to increase our ELL teacher, the need to add paraprofessionals, the need to increase our substitute teacher pay. You know, everything you're hearing about is needs here. You know, Jessica's needs are just as real as all the other ones that we've been talking about. The needs are real. These aren't wants. But to the extent that we are applying the $200,000, it will put us in a hole of a little less than 1%, about a 0.8% hole. Now, what does that mean for next year's budget? As we parachute out of it, right, we will either hope that revenue sources increase, right? We get more from our ECS grant. I get that mental health grant. We access additional revenue sources, or we cut positions or the budget in some way to mitigate it, or it shows up in a % increase in next year's budget, right? I mean, those are the 3 ways we have to work our way out of what we know is going to be a deficit position to start the year. But I'm comfortable, and then we're gonna have to figure out a way to do it, right? I mean, we'll figure out a way to do it. We will hope everybody stays healthy and our insurance premiums come in nice and low, and we get a year with a 1% budget increase in insurance, right? I mean, there are all of these things. Otherwise, yes, I'll be working with the administrators and looking at our staffing profiles and our needs. And, you know, you heard Eric, for example, talk about this year we had a nice year because we're not coming with enormous requests for Chromebooks, right? Because we had the connectivity grants. We're always on the lookout for additional revenue sources. We will continue to do that, and or hope that we can offset it with revenue. If we can't, yes, it means cuts or asking for a larger increase in next year's budget. That's the fact. Those are the only ways through this.
So, when you look at are we looking at this now, or you still need to wait to look at this?
So why don't we jump to the last slide? That's it, right? So I think at this point, what I'd love to do is kind of open it up to anything. Those are the questions I received by email. I wanted to get those out in front. Anything else you had about these, or anything in the book, or anything we've covered tonight, or anything in this entire presentation that we've...
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, you had a question.
On the spreadsheet you gave us here, the ESSER funding, it would indicate that 88+ thousand is allocated already for clinician for the middle school. And then the 200,000 that is in our discussion here, it looks like 78.6 is targeted to create smaller class sizes. Is that?
Okay, so what Stephanie will tell you, I'll let her explain it. But as a reminder, there are 3 acceptable uses for...
I understand that.
Right. Indoor air quality, essentially improving the indoor air quality, student mental health, or student performance. I believe, and I know I've seen the research, a key way to improve student performance is to have small class sizes. Right. So Stephanie will explain how she ledgers out one of our teachers so that, for example, we could be running kindergarten with 5 teachers right now, right? In which case, we would have class sizes in kindergarten closing in on 20, right? We added the 6th kindergarten teacher, right? And we did that to help student learning, which is absolutely an acceptable use for the ESSER funds.
Yep.
Correct, Stephanie?
Mhm.
So that Stephanie journals it that way and makes sure to update our grant application with that information.
So you're saying if the ESSER funds were used in this purpose, as you proposed, that you could potentially pay one of the first grade teacher salaries and make the argument, make the case that you're reducing class sizes in first grade by
Right, so
applying
this
funds that way.
You're actually saying
this
you will do
position
that.
specifically is the bubble that's in Gildersleeve from 4 years ago. I
Okay.
think it's the 3rd grade, 2nd grade or 3rd grade.
Right,
Because
we had a whole.
they were in open choice at first, but then when we made the kindergarten position, we put kindergarten open choice, and I moved this because it kind of works out, because by the
Right.
time these funds are over, they'll graduate out into 5th grade, so then that will wash that.
Okay.
And then we'll still have the kindergarten or 1st grade, or at that point, wherever it's at, in open choice.
Okay, so you would just be looking to wherever you could make the case that we
Right.
are,
We added
Yeah.
that position because to make the class sizes smaller, and it
Okay.
fits into what the grant
what
is
is
supposed to be used for,
allowable.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I did the Ryan position, because knowing that they will be going into 5th grade after that, so, and it won't be needed anymore.
Right, so that's 78,000.
So that cliff will go away.
Which,
The 78,600, that cliff will go away because we won't need that many positions.
Right.
So Tim, what she's
Well,
saying
we
is,
hope.
right now in 3rd grade, we have 6 sections.
right,
Right. Next year in 4th grade, we will have 6 sections. But then the year after that, this is another way to parachute, right? That 6th section won't necessarily be needed anymore
Right.
because students
It's
go
configured
to
differently
biz.
at biz.
And at biz, we're departmentalized.
Right.
So there will be larger class sizes, and at that point, Mike may be coming to me saying we need to add another English teacher or something. But otherwise, it just means a little larger class sizes.
Right.
And that's a function of how we schedule, the difference in how we schedule at Valley View and Gildersleeve versus how we schedule at Brownstone in the middle school.
Right.
right. So you really answered my question. All I was trying to get at is that there's a physical person or thing going on that has that 78,000
Mhm.
price tag on it. The 121,004, it appears
Those
to
are
be
para-
kind
those
of
are-
cash.
I was putting them as
Mm.
paras, it's 4 paras,
Okay.
because it's for, paras can help all students. Could we pick another teacher and put it in there? Sure, but
But we don't have anything right now this minute in this budget that says that's, we're
No.
paying
nope,
for
I
that.
have to go
So
in
if that
and-
went away, it removes the potential that we had some cash in
Yes.
the budget on reserve that we could have used for something that comes up. Like when they determined that
the
they
HVAC.
need more paras in kindergarten.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
So when we wrote the grant, we left that money open, and part of it was paraprofessional help, addition of teachers if needed, so we kind of left it broad,
Right.
for if we ever needed it.
But, and the only, I ask that because anytime we're using one-time money for annualized, it's gonna hurt us down the road. And it hurt us because we did it 3 years ago. and it
Well, that's
hurt
why I
us.
chose that one position, because I knew, so at least we will
Right.
be less 78,600
Right.
Right,
at that point, so.
right.
That's one parachute. We'll need another
Can I
one.
ask a question?
Of
I
course,
don't know if you
Stacy.
guys
Oh, hi, Stacy, yeah.
We can hear
We
you,
can hear
yeah.
you.
You can hear me?
Yep.
So I just wanted to ask the HVAC question. So I know this ESSER fund has, a limited time frame. Is any consideration for going out for another grant or anything for the HVAC? Is that planned? Is there anything in the works that is gonna come back and say, oh, we should have held out and waited to use that money to go towards the HVAC?
That's a really good question, and I have an interesting answer for that. You're gonna see, well, you will see it's in here, the HVAC is included in the capital budget that we're bringing forward. All right. Just yesterday, actually, Mr. Martin and I attended a webinar with the individual who's essentially the lobbyist for the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents, and I'm actually gonna find out more tomorrow when I attend the legislative breakfast. In terms of the list of priorities that I know is on the consideration list for the legislature this year is still HVAC funding, right? And I think that that's on there because of the incredible difficulties with that HVAC grant this year. The number of hoops that districts had to jump through with, bonding referendums on the spot and, town council motions and not being able to use ESSER funds as your matching and all of that. There was a lot of negativity feedback was given to our legislators about that process. We haven't yet heard from the state, because they're still culling through those applications, how much of that money is left. But I have a strong feeling, no guarantee, but I have a strong feeling that we're gonna learn more about additional grant opportunities for HVAC upgrades out of this legislative session, once the dust settles from the challenging experience that we had as a state this past year,
Right.
that we lived here.
And it was only $150 million, which didn't go very far with the 149 school districts.
Right. So my hope is that before the end of this year, I'm reporting back to the board, hey, I just heard that there's another availability, another round of funding coming out for HVAC upgrades. Otherwise, I will say, we do have it in the capital improvement budget, and we have a really good plan that Mr. Shea put forward for us that can help us chip away at our HVAC problems at the secondary school in a air handling unit by air handling unit way, right? So we don't have to do them all at once. We figured out a way, there are 8 air handling units? We can replace them one at a time as funding becomes available for it. But that's just the high school. Of course, you know, the bigger challenge of HVAC with Gildersleeve, Valley View, and Brownstone, I'm sure everybody's gonna chuckle, there is no VAC, there's only very much heat, right? That's gonna show up this spring when we talk about our facilities modernization plan.
Right.
Thank you.
Are there other questions, either new questions that weren't covered tonight? Are there particular slides that you'd like to go back and revisit or have more conversation about? I'd like to kind of take the pulse, I think, of where we're at, what we want to think more about or talk more about.
Sounds like last year was easier.
Yeah.
I will say that I'm concerned that we know we're most likely bringing staff in this year that are not included in next year's budget.
I share that concern.
You're speaking specifically to the use of the ESSER funds?
No, the paras that we
The paras.
know are,
The 8 paras that we know we're responsible for now.
the 4 that we know we're almost certainly going to have to hire this school year
Right.
that are not in the proposed budget
Right,
for next year.
right.
Well, they are. They're in this $121,000 one-time allocation, is the way I just heard it.
No.
No, they're not. They're
That's
for
to cover
additional.
existing positions.
These are 4
So this-
students who are needing a para today.
Yeah, let me see if I can clarify. So,
Yeah, I'm really confused. You're saying we have a need for 4 paras
Right.
today that we have not hired?
okay, so let me clarify. There are 2 separate requests, there are 2 separate things. There is the request from Valley View to add new paraprofessionals.
Front load. Right.
Forward.
Right.
That have never, ever been included in a Portland Public Schools budget,
Right.
ever before. This is a new funding request from Ms. Bruin and Valley View,
Right.
right? Which, at this point, as part of our administrative deliberations in the second round of cuts, I removed.
Right.
This is new. Those are 3 new positions. Those 3 new positions, Sarah is correct in saying that if we look to years past, it is likely that at some point next year, unless we have 100 kindergartners register, all of whom are
Ready to go.
ready to go and aren't gonna have any emerging needs, which would be, as Jessica will tell you, a first, right? That likely at some point next year, just like we did this year, right, you're gonna be hearing in personnel a request from Dawn and I to add paraprofessionals, that would then come to the board, that would then be added. And we went through this year, if you remember, back, I think it was the October
We did,
meeting, we
October.
added 4 paraprofessionals to the budget based on emerging need. And likely, with the new student that we know we just got very recently, and the emerging identifications from Valley View, there's gonna be a need for more, right? That's your point. That's what we're talking about, is Jessica's new paraprofessional request that is a proactive measure for what history tells us is likely to happen. Correct?
I think so. That might be conflating 2 things, though, that we are almost certain, unless, to Dawn's point, there are existing paras who are not one-on-ones who may be reassigned to these 4 new identified needs. Unless that exists, it seems to me that we will be bringing on 4 new staff to cover existing needs that we haven't budgeted for next year.
That's what's gonna happen.
Well, they're anticipated needs.
Yes.
I believe the 4 have been
Meaning we have
identified.
57 right now that were approved through the board. If these 4 that Dawn is talking about, is gonna be 4 additional that aren't even included in the budget for next year, or even in addition to the 3 Jess is requesting. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, I think we got it. We got it. Yeah,
Okay,
we're good.
Got
This
it.
year's budget
That
is
was-
impacted as well.
Yes.
Is that
Right.
what you're?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
I wanna make sure you understand.
Yeah,
that.
we're talking about this year's budget, but this is for next year's budget.
No, but she's
So
saying
that
those,
you
but she's saying those 4 are gonna also be.
And we're still
We're
gonna
talking
need it
about right
next year.
now.
Right,
You need 4 people tomorrow to be paras.
But we're working on next year's budget.
These proactive parents, I wouldn't have to come to you.
Right, and
To
so-
ask
right.
for those because they would already be there.
Right, so the 3 that were cut from the original request, because they were cut in a round of cuts, you would like to see that reinstated, because then you're proactive toward, at future needs. But right now, you still are needing 4 paras
4 that we didn't budget for.
that you didn't budget for.
That also means next year we haven't budgeted for.
We haven't put
I
those
think
in the
that's
budget,
what
right.
you were
That's
Right.
implying, yes.
So to that point, to Sarah's point, and I don't, maybe you don't have the answer to this yet, Dawn, but if there is a need that's about to happen this week, next week, whenever, for 4 kindergarten paras, do we have a sense yet of whether those paras are being reallocated from elsewhere in the district, or are we gonna need to hire 4 additional paras? Because if that's the case, within the next month, if we're hiring 4 additional paras, I think that Sarah's point is fair, that we need to be providing for them in next year's budget. If we see that coming immediately.
Yeah.
I know that we don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah, Jeff, let me grab this one. Let's worry about these separate, right? Because
Right, they should be.
we know, Stephanie and I are this close, right, to saying hiring freeze, like, to fully freezing the budget. But you have to understand, this was a really good week for me, right? Like, I'm really excited soon to introduce you to 2 new teachers that we just hired this week that are a huge plus side of the ledger for us, right? It's a very much a moving target, right? So we may not need it now, because I just had a great week and my administrative team did a wonderful job recruiting and getting us great young teachers.
But the hiring freeze idea, I hear you, and if these are IEP driven and needed and mandated, we are legally required to hire these folks.
are.
The hiring freeze doesn't impact that.
Correct. So for next year though, right, what we're really talking about, if you wanna like build the firewall for fully staffed, if we could find paras, which by the way is very difficult. And the other thing that complicates this very much is paras come and go an awful lot. You know, paras are you see the resignations. Paras leave because they become teachers or go on to other things pretty regularly. And, you know, we're in a situation this year where, you know, it's difficult to find people in general, although it's getting better. We would really need +7. The 4 that I cut, and the 3 that Jessica recommends we add. Right, it would need to be 7 additional added to the budget, right? That's not part of the superintendent's recommendations. Again, that would get us way above and beyond even 3.98%. Stephanie can do the math for us, but that's, you know, that's a number.
Yep.
But we could do somewhere a happy medium if we know those are coming. We know those students aren't leaving next year, but perhaps that, at that point, Dawn with her reallocating paras. So if we know we're hiring, say it's 3 this year, and we know we're budgeting for those 3 next year because the needs aren't going to go away, then I would feel better about that type of situation. And I have to say, I feel like districts in general are always chasing their tail, trying to cut down on money, and I think Jess's idea is a great one in that being proactive versus reactive, and to speak to learning loss and impact that these kiddos with these needs have on the school building. When you're trying to Band-Aid, you're trying to get the staff support, you're having to clear a classroom out, your instructional time lost because you don't have that para that is trained to help support. So I do think it's a great idea, and I think, you know, we should entertain some sort of proactive plan in this budget.
just to go back to the ESSER money, we're looking at a pretty significant deficit possibly for this year. If that money were not allocated as one time for next year, would it be able to play any role in helping us over the hump this year if we get to the end of the year and we're still $300,000 in the red?
Yes.
So we eliminate that possibility by allocating that to next year.
Yeah. Yes, except the board retains the ability to change the budget.
Right.
I mean, we will be modifying the budget pretty regularly throughout the spring as things like our insurance premium becomes clear, as things like the number of open choice students we get becomes clear. But let me see if I can give you this example. Let's say, and I'm hoping it doesn't happen this way, but we get to June, right? And Stephanie reports to us, we have a $200,000 deficit because we added paras and are paying our subs more and added the kindergarten teacher and paid the ELL teacher more, right? And that deficit is $200,000. Could the board at that time add that $200,000 from ESSER to cover that deficit? Yes. What would that mean? It would mean it wasn't in next year's budget, and that at that time I'm either making cuts or searching for additional revenue sources or freezing the budget, doing hiring freezes, or mitigating like crazy starting July 1. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Perfect sense, yes, thanks. That's what
And
I was-
again, that money has 3 buckets that it can be put into, and 200,000 may not be dumped into the budget as a Band-Aid because it may not meet the criteria of what the ESSER funds were intended for.
Correct. Which is why if you look at that slide that I just started with, which says ESSER money is not in the budget.
Right.
Oak Hill and ECS is, but since it's not in that 28 million,
Right.
it's therefore, we could use it in either this year. You know, it's it's available to us. It would be
Mhm.
available to us
Mhm.
if we needed it, which
Right. Which
you know,
we
Stephanie's
might.
projections are becoming clearer, and
There's also still a little bit more left in there as a buffer, just in
Right.
case
Right,
we need it.
understood.
There's some left.
Understood.
and there's the hope that we
The
get that
mental
mental health grant.
Mhm.
Which,
And there'll be
if
more.
we get the mental health grant, it would be larger because the mental health grant would go to pay for the clinician this year,
Right.
right? So, again, that's one of the challenges is that,
Right.
you know, we don't know yet.
Right.
So, Steph, just so I can understand, so the 288,665 here for the total for the ESSER money, that doesn't reflect the balance available to the district right now?
No, because
What's the balance?
remember, there's the summer school program. I had it off to the right. I didn't print it.
Right, oh,
So we
yeah,
still
no,
have
that's
to
fine,
run
I
the
just,
summer
I know,
school
that- I thought it was
program.
all allocated, though.
It
There's
is
about
on-
$89,000 left over.
How much?
About $89,000 left over. if-
That's unallocated?
That's
or-
unallocated.
That's
So
unallocated.
that could be used towards end of year. We wanted to save just in case. And then if we got the mental health grant, or if there was some, maybe we can do an air handling unit at the end.
Right.
There-
So
There's
there is
other
money.
options we can use it for if, I'm hoping we don't end up in a deficit.
I know you are, so are we. But, so there is another 89,000 that could be applied toward it, even if we tag this for next budget year,
Mhm.
for the
And
200.
remember, we have to spend it by next year,
Oh,
so.
yeah, oh, no, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is that money possibly used for the track, if there's an overrun on the track?
I don't think you can use it for track.
We
We
inquired
talked
about that, and the
before.
answer was
Yeah.
no. Pretty sure.
Yeah, we would not be
Even
able
though
to use
you
that
can
for a track.
breathe more deeply on the track.
Right, it's not part of the buckets, got it. All right, well, I don't have any further questions.
It sounds like that we still have questions or maybe a lack of consensus around para positions and the administrative assistant position.
But the administrative position is in the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, the 3 paras proactively for kindergarten are not in there, correct?
Correct.
The 3 proactive positions are not and a reduction of 4 is there.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
So
But
that's-
2 are retirees.
Yeah,
Two
so-
are,
so
two
we're-
are, 2 will just not be replaced.
Right, so what's in the budget is the administrative assistant. What's not in the budget are 7 para positions, 3 of which would be first-time new ground for Portland to enter as a proactive measure, and 4 of which are currently in our para pool.
Right. So, I'm having a couple of thoughts about that, and the first is that we talk about this a lot with our budget, with special education services, and with a lot of different things. We have a lot of different moving targets. We know that numbers are constantly shifting. So, I'm guessing, Charles, that you feel comfortable with the reduction in the 4 para positions, knowing that if need arises in next year's budget for 4 additional paras, or 8 additional paras, or 12 additional paras based on IEP needs, that our district has a legal and a moral obligation to shift things around to meet those needs and hire paras for our students who need them.
We will follow the law.
We will follow the law, and we know it's the right thing to do. So I think maybe that is helping me to feel more comfortable with that reduction, knowing that we will meet the needs in the future when they arise, because they always do arise. I'm not ready to move on from this idea of preemptively identifying 3 transition paras for the kindergarten classes, because I think that, I mean, as you said it, and I completely agree with you, Kim, it's a great idea, and it's smart to be thinking about it proactively. I also think that it's such a small chunk of time. Like, we will be hiring those paras, whether it's October or November or December next year. We will be hiring them or reallocating them from elsewhere to meet these student needs. So the actual impact to our budget is a couple of months of para salaries, and that's a very small amount of money.
About
But-
$78,000 for full-time.
3 paras for, I'm talking about the couple of months that,
Right.
you know, because they will be hired, they will be in the budget eventually.
Yep.
The potential impact to our kindergarten teachers, to our kindergarten students, to me, would absolutely be worth that investment of those additional couple of months.
Well, what do the numbers look like? For a para, $26,000 a year, right? Times 3 is about 78,000. And they're full-time, so they have benefits. About 10,000.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering if there's a compromise to be found in there somewhere.
No, just,
And what that might look like, if, you know.
She's looking at the numbers, so.
3,
Yeah.
I just think it moves us in the wrong direction.
75,
Yeah, and then what about?
75, 281.58.
Say that again?
75, 281.58, and then when we do budgeting for benefits, we usually
Benefits and
do,
things, about 110,000.
we do the usually a 2-family plan, so about 14,000, so add
Oh, 14 times 3.
14,000 times 3.
So, yeah, another 45,000. 70, whatever, yeah, about $120,000 we would be adding to the budget for 3.
Right.
And
that'll-
right now, what's the line item for the full-time administrative assistant? What number was put in there?
For the salary?
Yeah.
I'm glad I got my computer.
That's probably gonna be about 65 or 70,000.
So what, are you calculating the new annual percentage on that?
I'm looking up, so
Oh, no, you,
on a D1 step one, is $39,468.
And then another $14,000 for benefits.
And then the secretary benefits, administrative assistant benefits, a two-person is $25,202 for two-person,
So 40,
Two-person what?
26 so 65,000
For what?
for insurance.
for insurance. So you're
Oh.
talking 65,000 for an administrative assistant.
Each union has
But the
different
administrative
prices.
assistant's already in the budget, isn't it?
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
but
So
she
why
was
are
just
we
asking,
figuring-
she was
Oh.
just asking.
She's asking what
Kim
what
was
it was.
asking
She
for
wanted
it.
to know, yeah.
To see what the total was that was budgeted for that.
Right.
So 39 plus 25.
So could the athletic director and Eric live with an 18-hour-a-week person, which would be .5? Or anything over that would be getting benefits, so under 20 hours, they don't get benefits, correct?
I believe it's 30.
Is it under 30?
I think it's 30.
Oh, okay, then that changed. Could you live with 9 hours a week?
Well, let's,
I guess that's,
let me see if I get the sense of where the board's heading here. It sounds like based on this conversation, the desire is to remove approximately $65,000 that is in the budget for the 10-month administrative assistant to support the assistant principal and the director of curriculum instruction and technology, and to add back in $120,000 for 3 paraprofessionals to build proactive support in kindergarten. The net difference from that would be 120 minus 65, which would be approximately a $55,000 increase to this year's budget, which would involve not having the secretary, but putting in 3 paraprofessionals that could be hired over the summer to start at the end of August with our kindergarten teachers. That's what I was hearing.
I guess that my question, I think what Meg was trying to get at too, is there some kind of compromise in there? If the board was interested in providing part-time admin assistant to provide some help to these 2 departments that clearly very desperately need it. And I want to say that I hear what both of you said this evening and appreciate it and absolutely understand that there is a need there. But if we were trying to reach some sort of a compromise, would there be benefit, would there be enough benefit to athletics and to Eric's work if we provided a part-time admin assistant? And would there be enough benefit if we provided 1 transition para or 2 transition paras instead of the requested 3?
Right.
Is there a way that we could explore?
find that balance.
Yeah, to explore that balance.
Yeah, and, you know, again, I mentioned a plan B.
Yep.
You know, I have an alternative idea to support athletics, potentially with a stipend position.
Mhm.
I would have to talk further with Eric and Holly
Mhm.
about the type of support they might need and whether that might come in the form of increasing the hours that we pay our tech intern to support.
Mhm.
So, you know, I'm definitely not ready to have that conversation, nor do I want to engage in it right now with these folks. But certainly, I think we all appreciate hearing this, and we know what the needs are, and you know, let's get to a place where you're comfortable with the budget number, which is gonna change because we don't know our
Of course
insurance
it is,
premiums
yeah.
yet, and, you know, but we are under a timeline for adopting a board budget, but the budget you adopt tonight isn't gonna be the budget we have July 1, I guarantee it, there's too many moving pieces, right? It's gonna flesh out, right? We're gonna know what our insurance increase is. You know, we're gonna make sure we have the SIG grant. There are too many things that we don't have to solve all of these challenges right now.
Right. Agreed.
And I think a lot of these ideas also have to be, you know, vetted the right way with input from Teachers Association administrators and the Personnel Committee
Mhm.
before it gets to the full board as a recommendation.
Mhm. So you're suggesting that we take the budget as it is tonight with some tweaking, future tweaking, after you talk to all the other powers that be.
Might I make a suggestion then?
Yeah.
I think what I'm hearing as a consensus of the board right now is take that, Charles, take that $65,000 that you currently have budgeted line item to secretary. And we want to see that used for paras, however many you can get, which is one, right, plus a little leftover, right? So at least there's one para proactively for kindergarten support, right? Which again, would mean you need to vote to approve tonight a 3.98% budget, and Stephanie and I will make those adjustments. And you'll see those show up in the changes to all the classified salaries. Did everybody follow me on that one?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think what I'm hearing is, we hear the needs, we as a board are placing a priority on the need for proactive paras in kindergarten over administrative assistant for those two departments, but we're interested in ideas or creative ways to get support to Frank and Eric going forward.
Right.
And we need to vet those out more fully.
I'm a little, because they were talking about hiring a halftime, you said secretary, but you mean administrative assistant, right? We're still talking administrative, okay. And bring on, was it 3 or 4 additional paras? And, I mean, that's gonna, we're already, I mean, frankly, we're really at an almost 5% budget increase with the 200,000 in the SER funding. So it looks like it sounds like what we're proposing would actually go beyond that increase
Yep.
that is already proposed.
Well, actually not, because I think we're just.
I was asking the superintendent.
Yeah, so if you voted to approve the 3.98%, Dylan, can you put the slide back up? Back up, slide.
Because it's 4.84.
Yeah, back up,
With
up,
the
slide,
one-time
keep
money.
going back, keep going back, keep going back, keep going back, keep going back. Oh, nope, now go forward one, go forward one more, there. If you voted tonight to authorize that amount, right, within that amount is $65,000 for an administrative assistant. To get 3 paraprofessionals, Stephanie just told us it was 120,000, right? So the $65,000 for the administrative assistant would get us at least one, and a little bit more, a little bit left over, for either a second or the potential for additional stipend or other type support for Frank and Eric, right? So here's, if you approve that amount, I'm hearing you loud and clear, we're not gonna hire a secretary over the summer. We're gonna hire one para, and that will leave us with some funding left over to engage Eric, Chuck, and potentially the Teachers Association in a discussion about a stipend position to support athletics and some extra funding left over to potentially something like increase the hours for the tech intern or some additional man hours for Eric. But that's, you know, that had,
And to add to that, if we are saying that we accept the 3.9% budget, that is moving those ESSER funds.
Yes.
That's in that 3.98.
that is
Yes.
correct.
Yes.
Correct. That,
So it's a two-part, decision.
right, right. If you chose not to use the ESSER funds in there, we're at 4.84.
Right.
So the 3.98 would get us everything I reviewed with you over the past 2 days, one additional paraprofessional to support kindergarten, and some leftover funds for me to work creatively with and engage in conversations with the administrators, the Teachers Association, and the Personnel Committee to, short of an administrative assistant, talk about what we might create in terms of either stipends or administrative internship support for those departments that need the help. Did everybody follow that? I want to make sure
I
that.
think so.
Yeah.
Well, and did you have something, Stacy?
No, I just said yes, I understand.
So, I mean, we could actually just plan on, there's almost 90,000 in ESSER funding that remains. That is an appropriate use for paras.
Yes, indeed.
I was an administrator in my previous life before I retired. I know how hard it is to do your job without anybody to support you in it. So I just would hate to see not any help come for Eric and for the vice principal because I know that's a tough haul. But it just seems we don't have to, I just don't want to throw that away, I guess is the thing. And if the money's there, it could be properly used for that purpose, then we wouldn't need to chip in to the money for the administrative assistant.
You're, sorry, to just make sure I understand, Tim, you're suggesting that we go ahead and allocate additional ESSER funds?
Well, no, we would know that when the next budget year comes, that money's there. We're not struggling to find it. We don't have to put it into the current budget because there's already funds there that would be able to be utilized.
Yeah, I think let me see if I can rephrase some of that. I think I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
We know we have 200. We have an additional little buffer there, right? But we know we can spend it this year. And if we're in a deficit position at the end of the year, you'll likely hear that as my recommendation because we have to pay our bills, right? But if we've done a good job and this was a really good week and that money's remaining next year, I think that that's an important opportunity, as we do all the time with this board, to make recommendations to you about how we spend that. And if I were to say to you, hey, we've done well, we have some ESSER money left over, we're building the cliff larger, but let's use it for the additional paraprofessionals that we want to get in kindergarten, which then creates the placeholder in the classified salary line items for the administrative assistant, it might open up that conversation again. But in the meantime, I will absolutely engage the administrators, the Teachers Association, Frank and Eric, about short of an administrative assistant, how we might identify stipends or provide additional support.
Right.
In a sort of Plan B type way.
Right.
So that would be a conversation you'd be looking to revisit kind of in July, August, as we know how everything resolved with this year's budget.
July and
Might
August are
happen
a
sooner.
wonderful time to do that
Yeah.
because the dust has settled. We'll know what our ECS grant is. We'll know what our insurance premium is. We'll know how many open choice students we can, well, we don't sometimes know until the fall, but we'll have a good idea about what open
How many
choice students we
seats are
have.
we
It's a more terra firma time in the budget world. But I gotta be completely honest, we could be in a worse situation.
Sure.
Right? I mean, the ECS grant could be lower. We could have fewer open choice students. The insurance company could come back with a 9% increase. They're not gonna.
But we
I'm not
have
trying
some
to scare everybody,
flexibility with that 200,000 as well.
Right. It's nice to have that there. It is an opportunity. That all gets us back to now, the support for that number.
I can support that number, the 3.98%.
And of course, the
With the
vetting that it
with the
goes through going
caveat
forward.
to, yeah. I can.
Yeah,
I'm
I
comfortable.
absolutely can support the number.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there additional questions about the overall budget numbers? Do folks feel comfortable voting on that tonight? Do you need additional time to think it over? I believe if we needed to, we could push the vote off until Tuesday's meeting.
We're meeting on Tuesday.
If it
We
was,
meet
if
Tuesday, yeah.
folks felt better having a couple of days to think this over. If there's consensus around the budget numbers, then we could take action tonight.
I would prefer to wait, it's just me.
We prefer to wait till next
I would,
Tuesday.
just because I
Yep.
feel like I'm still wrapping my head around, and I'm still
Sure.
not comfortable with the 200,000 one time.
Yep,
It just digs us a hole in it.
yeah, I hear you. Dave, you were gonna say something?
No, I'm just saying, I'm comfortable with the way it is now because, you know, sometimes I laugh a little bit because we talk about $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 on a $28 million budget. So, you know, Charles will find different pools of money if he needs to get what he needs, or come to us. So I feel comfortable that he would take the 23.6, and if we need 2 paras and we need to cut back on something else, he'll do that, or he'll come to us for more money. So I think we just need to give him a starting point, because if we don't, we're not gonna get there. And we all know there's probably gonna get challenged at the Board of Selectmen, so we just need a starting point.
Yeah, that's fair. Kim, how are you feeling?
I can support the percent increase, all of that, and I hope you understand, I am in a pseudo-administrative role, I have my own 9-2. I'm not seeking your job because I don't envy your job. So I know there is so much work behind it, so please know. I'm coming from a good place, I just wanna make sure our students are supported. So I feel good about our number, and I feel good that Charles has other ideas up his sleeve, and that if we can move forward with a compromise, I'm comfortable with that.
Sarah, how are you
I
feeling?
echo what Dave and Kim, just said.
Yeah.
All right, and Meg?
Yeah, no, I'm very comfortable with it, and as long as we make sure that the changes are made to the classified salary line and that the creative juices flow for how we get the administrative support that is needed by our athletic director and our technology curriculum director.
Okay. So Tim has asked, and I'm absolutely comfortable holding off, and putting this on the agenda
Tuesday.
would be under old business. I guess it's revisiting the budget, adding it to old business on Tuesday, and we can, plan
That's
to
fine.
take action then. Just give everybody a couple more days to think it over and see if we have any last minute things that you need answers for.
Maybe put the language together in a motion, so that
For
we
sure.
have exactly what we're voting on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds good.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of confusion, or there seems to be about paras and paras and paras, and so we want to make sure that it's clear, but yeah, I think Tuesday's appropriate. I certainly support a motion.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
just to clarify, that language is gonna involve the removal of the administrative assistant.
Yes.
The addition of one, that's sort of the compromise position I
I
think
think
we've come
so,
to.
yeah, yeah.
Proactive kindergarten paraprofessional, knowing that we'll add more,
Yes,
but that's next
but
year's
it's a good beginning.
challenge.
It's a good,
And it also creates about a $25,000 buffer,
there's wiggle room there.
wiggle room for me to be creative with potential stipends and discussions with the team about how we support our athletic director and
Yeah.
assistant principal and director.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it is good.
If 30,000 is what you got to play with and 65 is what we budgeted, you can't find $30,000 someplace else to make this happen?
Probably can.
I
We'll
likely
start
could,
digging
Dave.
through the cushions in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
freight
exactly.
room.
I'm
Little
confident that
sofa
Stephanie and I
dining,
can
sofa mining,
Yeah.
couch mining,
be creative.
couch mining.
Yeah. I mean, if we were talking 300, I'd be a little more concerned,
Yeah.
but,
Right.
Yeah.
you know, we're talking about less than one half of 1%, right? I mean,
Yeah.
quarter of 1% at that point. This is doable. I think we can address some of the needs you've heard about.
Right. Yeah, I think that's great, and I think that, you know, it is just good to kind of reflect on this and express that it sounds like there is board support. It sounds like there is absolutely board support for trying to find, the administrative support that our administrators need, as well as for trying out this idea, for transition paraprofessionals in kindergarten, and maybe we can pilot it with one and see how it goes, and with hope for adding more in the future if it
Yeah.
ends up being the tremendous support that we expect that it will be. So I just thank you to all of our administrators for all of your work and for bringing this to us and answering all of our questions, and thank you to our board members for asking lots of thoughtful questions.
Yeah, round of applause for the administrators and Charles.
And Charles, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So,
Thanks, Steph.
did you have any final thoughts before we
Adjourn.
move? No, well, we've got a final public comment, but did
Right.
you have any?
I think I speak on behalf of all of them when I say thank you. I liked the process this year, and I'd love feedback on it, because I think it gave you an insight into what these folks have asked for, right? And we haven't done it this way in the past. If you like this way of doing it, I'd like to see us continue it in the future. I think it creates an awful lot of transparency, and gives you real insight into what the needs are in the field.
Yeah.
We love seeing you guys. Yeah.
Thank you, Charles. So, that said, is there anybody who's joined us online or in person who wishes to offer public comment?
Wait a minute, hold a curtain.
I know, I just remembered,
And the
that the board, I did want to acknowledge during public comment that the board received, the board received an email from Darcy expressing, support for the idea of transition paraprofessionals in the kindergarten classroom. I don't actually have Darcy's address or name or anything, but the board has received that email, so just for the record. I'm sure we've all read it. And if there's no additional public comment, nothing in the chat? All right, then I will take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that. Oh.
Thank you, Meg.
Second by Tim.
Thank you, Tim. All right, all in favor? Aye.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you.
Hope you feel better.
Thank you.